Doctor Who Story by Story. Snake Dance. Just the facts. Snake Dance is the second story of the 20th anniversary season of Doctor Who, a four-parter broadcast twice weekly from the 18th to the 26th of January 1983. It starred Peter Davison in his second season as the Fifth Doctor, as well as Janet Fielding and Sarah Sutton as his companions Tegan and Nyssa. The story was produced and script-edited by John Nathan Turner and Eric Saward respectively, and written by Christopher Bailey as a sequel to his story Kinda, which was broadcast during the previous season. Plot. The story sees Tegan, who has been suffering nightmares about her possession by the entity known as the Mara the previous year, seemingly unconsciously direct the TARDIS to the planet Manussa, which turns out to be the home world of the Mara. Manussa is celebrating the anniversary of the Mara's destruction hundreds of years earlier, but the commemoration is largely a ceremonial joke, with most of the populace no longer taking the story seriously, and even fewer regarding the myths of the Mara's return as being in any way credible. However, the Mara, part of which is still lurking inside Tegan, again takes possession of her and begins spreading its influence to others, including Lan, the son of the Manussan ruler, and sets about making plans for its spectacular and bloody re-emergence. Guest cast. The guest cast for this story includes Martin Clunes, now a major star in shows such as Men Behaving Badly and Doc Martin, as Lan, Jonathan Morris, who became famous in the 80s and 90s sitcom Bread, as Chilla, and a number of notable character actors including Colette O'Neill, John Carson, Preston Lockwood, and Brian Miller, who was the husband of companion actress Elizabeth Sladen, who played Sarah Jane Smith. Miller was also the voice of several Daleks in the later 80s Dalek stories Resurrection and Remembrance of the Daleks, and played that ramp in the first Peter Capaldi story, Deep Breath. Trivia. Eric Saward commissioned writer Christopher Bailey to write a third Mara story, but the story was eventually abandoned. The last episode of Snake Dance overran to such an extent that the closing scene in which the Doctor comforted Tegan and explained that she was now fully free of the Mara was abandoned, and a similar scene inserted into the beginning of the next story, Mordrin Undead. The story was novelized by stalwart Who novel writer and former script editor Terrance Dicks in 1984 and was released on VHS and DVD in 1994 and 2012 respectively, in the latter case being packaged with its predecessor, Kinda, as a Mara Tales box set. The Doctor Who DVD Files magazine also included a DVD copy of the story with its 103rd issue, which was published in the December of 2012. In a numbering system which counts the untelevised but commercially available Tom Baker story, Shada, which any sane person does anyway, it is the 125th Doctor Who story. This numbering system is reflected by the Region 1 DVD releases. What the fans said. Fandom is a strange and fickle beast, and the critical reception of many stories often has little basis in objective reality or what is actually presented on screen. Sometimes, however, it can at least be good for a laugh. Fandom has a generally if not completely favorable view of Snake Dance, regarding it as a solid and enjoyable story for the most part, although the segment of fandom that regards its predecessor, Kinda, as one of the greatest stories ever made, seems to believe that, while good, Snake Dance is just not on the same intellectual level. What I think. I like Snake Dance a lot. While it is not one of my absolute favorite stories of all time, I do regard it as one of the better stories of the Peter Davison era and one of the best of the often underrated but actually very enjoyable season 20. Do I think it's better than Kinda? Does the Pope shit in the woods? In my view, Snake Dance is a vast improvement on its predecessor, which is quite poorly constructed and has seemingly caused a lot of fandom to confuse being nonsensical as being intellectual, which tells you a lot about their state of thinking and fandom consensus all on its own. In contrast to its predecessor, Snake Dance has a good plot that makes sense and stands up without the need for the presence of a whiteboard or a wannabe academic intellectual to wank on about all the metaphorical meanings of this, that and the other shit. The script is also full of good, well-defined and understandable characters and some excellent world building, another aspect of Kinda that fell rather short in many ways. But here Manus and society is well created and thought through and similar enough to our own to be relatable while different enough to be credible as an exotic locale. The story is effectively a supernatural thriller with a strong through line and a good deal of menace. Janet Fielding is much better here than she was in Kinda. Not only has Fielding simply improved as an actress since the previous season, but the much vaunted possession of her in the previous story effectively lasted for a grand total of one scene, making it rather difficult to comprehend how or why she received so many plaudits for it. Here Tegan gets to be possessed for a good 3/4 of the story, and she makes a very good job of it and a surprisingly effective villain, as does Clunes as the possessed clan. Although Nyssa has less to do than Tegan, in the latter's absence she does get to serve as the primary companion figure to the Doctor, as she did in the previous story, Arc of Infinity, and again is very likable in this capacity, Sutton having also improved as an actress since her earliest days in the series. Peter Davison is also in good form and the guest cast is all solid and effective. The story also features a number of very good cliffhangers, such as the explosion of the crystal ball at the end of episode 1 and Tegan's glowing red eyes at the close of part 2. Snake Dance is an all-studio production, which can often be a problem with stories that have outdoor scenes, as is the case here, but while the production definitely has a theatrical feel to it, this is by no means necessarily a bad thing, and the production is solid enough for it not to matter. All in all, Snake Dance is a very strong story from the era and one I happily return to on a frequent basis. Snake Dance gets a straight A from me.